Since 2015, Mental Health America has collected and analyzed nearly 75,000 work health surveys to publish 7 research reports. My guest today, Suzi Craig, is the Vice President of Workplace Mental Health at MHA and will share with us the key findings from their 2024 Mind the Workplace report. Together, we will explore the key ingredients to creating a workplace culture that promotes employee mental health and well-being. What is the recurring theme throughout the report that could move the needle on your organization's health score? Stick with us and find out. This is E3, Engage and Empower with Empathy. Welcome to the show, Suzi. It's so nice to have you here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. It's been nice getting to know you and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And mental health in the workplace is such a passion of mine. Like I'm really interested in learning more about how we can help employers and leaders approach the topic of mental health, kind of remove the stigma. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of mental health, could you just talk a little bit about Mental Health America? Maybe share a short overview of your mission and perhaps what your specific role is in enhancing and supporting workplace mental health.
Sure. So Mental Health America has it's been around a hot second. We've been around since 1909. And we started as an advocacy organization. We continue to be an advocacy organization. We were founded by a man named Clifford Beers, who is little known, unfortunately, but he's really considered the grandfather of recovery and grandfather of the advocacy movement and mental health. So our roots go way back to really understanding and supporting what the experience is like for someone who's struggling with a mental health condition, and that's beyond the diagnosis. That's just understanding, what is it like to go about your life and your day, and also, have these extra layers of struggles that a lot of people can't see. And so our roots go way back to, public education and advocacy and programs that really help our affiliates. So we have over 130 affiliates across the country. And that's actually where I started in the mental health fields. My background is a whole mixed bag, but I came to this work as working for Mental Health Connecticut. I was the chief strategy officer there. Amazing, wonderful organization. And I learned so much. It's kind of like a speakeasy with a secret knock. Like the mental health field is really complicated and there's a lot of moving parts. But there's just amazing work that people do in this field that goes, very, very much unnoticed. I think it's fair to say since the pandemic and things started becoming more visible to all of us, that I think we're all talking about this at some level, right? Which is great. That's great. Mental Health America is really love being here because our focus is on prevention, it's on intervention, it's on understanding lived experience and what is it like for an individual. And obviously those experiences are vast and varied, but how can we learn from that to drive good policy, to create best practices, to really understand how we should be changing and shifting to support people in their needs when it comes to mental health across the entire spectrum, whether you have a diagnosis or not, right? We want to make sure that we're inclusive of everyone so that they can understand what the difference is between, oh, I'm feeling like I'm really on it today. My all systems go, like things are great. And then what happens when that changes, right? So people need to know that information so that they know when to get help and when they need support. And that, that's an ongoing effort that our team does. And when it comes to the workplace, I've been at Mental Health America for about a year and a half. So this work started before I got here, and I was so impressed with the work that they've done for really almost a decade, understanding in workplaces what does it take to create a safe, supportive environment. What do employers need to know? What do managers need to know? What do employees need to know to create that safe environment so that like in our organization and their organization, they can be focused on prevention and understanding, when people actually need support. So what that looks like for us is a lot of research. We research on the employer side, and we also research and get direct information from employees, because it's really important to understand what is that employee experience. Every year I see a survey that says there's this huge gap between what leaders think in how they think they're doing well and what the employee experience actually is. That gap's always going to be there, right? As a leader, you want to think you're doing good things. It's not nefarious. Employers look, I put all these things into place and benefits and support, like I'm doing great. But it's really important to understand that gap in experience and where the nuances are, so that the leadership can pivot in their investments and understand how they are actually truly making a difference in their workplace programs. So we do a lot of research, and we have our Bell Seal certification for mentally healthy workplaces, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. And then online, the developing of best practices and the research, we give a lot of resources away for free. So we have our Workplace Wellness Resource Center. Anybody can go in there and understand, whether you're an HR professional, a business leader, or an employee, understand, depending on your topic, how you can be supported in the workplace.
That's great. And I love that you talked about having that psychological safety as the foundational component to really addressing the mental health crisis, I would say, in the workplace. I think Gallup talked about this as well, with the great detachment happening right now, where employees are essentially detaching from their organizations, becoming more disenchanted with their work, less engaged, and it's at an historical low, basically. So clearly there is that gap there that needs to be narrowed. But how can we help both sides kind of come together? And I found it really interesting in the latest Mind the Workplace report that came out late last year. You basically surveyed a little less than 4,000 employees across 21 industries in the US. And there were a lot of key themes that emerged around trust, appreciation, psychological safety, support at work. Having come from the corporate environment myself, I definitely see how leaders, they really truly want to make the effort to bridge that gap. But I think where we fall short as leaders is I like to call it, we tend to approach it as a check the box kind of style, where we partner with human resources and we implement all these great tools and resources that employees have access to, but then it stops there. Looking at the results of the Mind the Workplace report, where we really need to dig more deeply is with the organizational culture and the leadership culture. So you can have this great menu of HR options and tools for your employees, but if you don't have the organizational culture to match that, then it's not going to be as impactful as you hoped it would be. What was your initial reaction to the results of the report and the data?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first you bring up a great point. If I put my empathy hat on, right, and this is, I love that this is your focus. And then the leaders that I talk to, and that I've been talking to for years now, what keeps them up at night is that, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Like, I'm sure there are nefarious leaders out there and not thinking about this stuff, but the majority of the companies that I talk to, they just want someone to tell them what to do, what is the right thing to do, right? To make sure that their employees are supported and supported in the right way. And they've got to, they've got to balance a budget and make sure that those investments are the right investments that actually have positive results, right? My go-to statistic in the Mind the Workplace report is the one around EAPs and health benefits, and how, when we look at healthy workplace environments and unhealthy workplace environments, so every year when we're going into our 8th year of doing the Mind the Workplace report, we come at this from a comparative. We ask a lot of questions to determine the employee's experience. Do you foresee yourself in a healthy workplace environment, or is it an unhealthy workplace environment? And then comparatively looking at the data and crossing those two worlds gives us a lot of insight. So to me, the most fascinating statistic was that in 13 out of 15 categories. So 15 categories, right? Employees working in healthy workplace environments reported higher levels of support, like really well documented higher levels of support in areas such as people manager training, mentorship programs, employee resource groups. We can define that if folks don't know what that is, and professional growth opportunities. So the things that are really important to the employee, like, do I have a supportive manager? Do I have support there? Is the company care about my future? Do I have a group to go to, employee resource groups that I can really talk about hard things, and I know I'll be supported, and those concerns will be floated up to the top. Is there a mentorship program and other things that will support me in my role specifically? Those are the things that employees care about. And those were the things that rose to the top, whether you found yourself in a healthy organization or an unhealthy organization. The EAP and the benefits were similar, but those were the things that employees cared about. We've known this, since the 1980s when EAPs were created. The utilization rates haven't shifted beyond, 5 to 8%. And yet we continue to create them and put them out there, and we continue to hang our hat on, this is the thing, that's going to do the job. I will say that is changing. It's a much longer conversation, but that is changing. People are actually looking at those programs and trying to understand what benefits, employees can use. However, to your point about trust in a workplace culture, we found time and time again, if I do need help and support, but I do not trust my manager, if I feel like, this organization doesn't have my best interests, I'm not going to use an EAP, because it doesn't matter how much your HR person tells you that there's HIPAA and I won't know what's going on in those conversations, or how you're using that. Some employees will never believe it and they won't use those. It's not like you need to remove all that and that they're not important, but investing in creating a healthy, psychologically safe, supportive culture where the leadership walks the talk. One of our other stats when we're gathering data on top employers is 74% of the top employers that we work with openly share their lived experience. 74%. And those are the organizations that really get it. Those are the ones that understand that if I share my story openly in town halls, in meetings, or I'm just real open about my struggles, it's an instant way for an employee to say, oh, this is okay here. I can do this too, right? Maybe not for everybody, but it really sets the stage. And sometimes that can be even more important than a random benefit that you've decided to invest in, right?
It's interesting. And when you were talking about the trust piece, I was thinking of experience I've had with employee engagement surveys, where employees were even afraid to take the survey because they didn't trust that it was anonymous, even though absolutely 100% it was. And the HR team took measures to ensure anonymity. But yeah, if you don't have that trusting culture, then you're going to probably not see good employee engagement survey completion rates either. So it's like a ripple effect. It impacts everything you try to implement across the organization. And I love what you talked about with regards to vulnerability, because I feel like some leaders see being vulnerable like that as a sign of weakness. And, they want to be stoic. They want to show strength. And especially during tough times, like, I'm steering the ship and I have things under control, right? To your point, people really appreciate the fact that you're admitting you're human and you have flaws and you have struggles, and it's okay. It's like, you don't have to stand up in a town hall and burst into tears. You just have to admit that every day is a different day and you have ups and downs just like everyone else.
Right.
Because no
Right.
one's perfect.
Right. Because the subtext of the message of what you're sending is, this is important to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to say those words. As a matter of fact, you're going to do more harm than good if you say mental health is important to talk about, but then you don't talk about it. Who's going to believe that?
Yeah.
Right. Right. So, yeah.
So, you're seeing things starting to evolve in the workplace, but there's still a part of our leadership culture that's still kind of clinging to the old ways of doing things from the 1980s. What I'm trying to do is help leaders guide their organizations through change. So to create more agile and resilient organizations using the power of empathy, creating a culture that's psychologically safe. So basically creating that foundational culture that will allow you to change and evolve. So, based on what you've seen in the report, which aspects of empathetic leadership or leadership culture do you think are key to building that healthy and resilient organization that will help organizations evolve out of the old ways of doing things and move into the new way of
Hmm.
doing things?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a few. I think, when I think about the workplaces where the leaders and the employees can honestly say, I show up at work and I have everything I need to get my work done, and I feel, safe and supported, and all the things are doing great. It is a workplace that doesn't see mental health or workplace wellness as a competing priority with the organizational priorities. These are the workplaces and the leaders that really have done the work to make this a part of who they are. It's a part of their DNA, right? For instance, we had on World Mental Health Day, we had this great, you were a part of, you joined us for that. It was a great conversation. I don't know if you're a part of the conversation with General Dynamics, EDIT, their IT division. And they talked about how it's a part of their infrastructure, right? It's a part of their communication plan. It's a part of, it's not just a campaign during Mental Health Month. It's a part of management training. They look at the entire year and they figure out how are we going to bake this into, from the town halls to the management meetings and one-on-ones. It goes from orientation and onboarding of employees all the way through performance reviews, all the way through, exit interviews, all the way through professional development. You're hiring into a culture, right? Especially if you're a manager, you're hiring into a culture that has a strong value system and an understanding of this is how things work here, right? And what I found really interesting about that conversation with GDIT is they hire a lot of veterans and military and a lot of folks that are coming from a place where talk about the last thing that you talk about is mental health,
Mm,
right? So they've been conditioned to not be able to talk about this and not feel safe in the workplace, right? You have your guard up all the time, right? So Amy's just Gilliland has done this amazing creation of a culture that sets the stage for, the employees to not just show up and feel supported, but their performance levels are through the roof, their retention levels are really high. And that's, the business case part of this that we talk about with employers all the time. And the ones that have, taken this approach, which is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Just, I hear that phrase probably too much, but it's very corporate.
it's true.
But it is true, right? This stuff doesn't happen overnight. If you invest in having a real strategic approach to workplace wellness, and you have feedback loops and you're really understanding what people's concerns are, and then you're actually changing things in your organization to meet those needs. But it's really from this is a part of who we are, and this is even if it's not today, we want this to be a part of who we are moving forward. That alone sends a message to employees that, oh, at least they're aware and they're trying and they're investing, because you can make mistakes as a leader, and I think that's back to your point about vulnerability and um feeling like you part of that is like you feel like you have to have all the answers, right? The more you communicate that, like, we see you, we understand that this, because it doesn't matter what company you are, it's in mental health is, and stress and burnout and all of those things are rising, loneliness, like pick your
Yeah.
topic. We have 4 generations in the workplace. Don't get me started on the attack on DEI, right? Like pick your topic of things. And pick your topic of things in life, they land in the workplace, right? So the more that you create this environment where people can give feedback and it's like, oh, this is just a part of who we are. It's just how we do things here. You're going to have less employees leaving your organization. You're going to have more employees talking about how awesome it is to work there. Who doesn't want that? Right?
Absolutely.
And all the things around productivity and engagement and also, giving leaders a hall pass for making a couple mistakes, right? Like if you're genuine and true about making a difference in the long term, maybe we don't see the shifts right away, but we're on it, we're working on it. It's been shown, just not in our research but others, that like that goes a long way. People will stick with you because they want to believe, they want to know that you at least are aware and you're trying.
So we've been talking a lot about like the collective organizational culture and how we collectively as leaders can better support and create this environment where people feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. Let's talk about the individual people leader. Having had experience working with people leaders in the corporate world, I do feel like they all have good intentions, genuinely good intentions, but there isn't necessarily training available or coaching available for people leaders around mental health and how to have difficult conversations with employees around this topic.
Yeah.
And maybe we can learn a little bit from GDIT. I don't know how they coach their people leaders to have conversations with military veterans, for example, who have been trained not to, to basically hold things to themselves. And I'm sure in many cases, these people are experiencing things like PTSD and, serious mental health issues that should be addressed and would probably impact their work. So, I mean, how do you help people leaders navigate this difficult topic and support their employees? Because I really think the communication piece is a difficult one.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. I think first let's step back and recognize one of the biggest challenges that is pointed out all the time, but it is true. It still continues, which is if someone's good at their job, they usually get promoted into a management position because they're good at their job.
Yeah.
Yet, more often than not, and it's hard to make these sweeping generalizations, but if there isn't a not just training, but a conversation with that person to say, hey, you're doing great. Do you want to go to the next level? And do you want to be a manager? Here's what the manager role is, because you're a subject matter expertise in, engineering or accounting or whatever this thing is. If you're a manager and you're leading people, it's a different job. It's not just like an elevated extension of what you're doing. You are shifting into a different job, and you need to not shift who you are, but shift where you put your time and energy, how you're going to need, to learn about how to be an empathetic, supportive leader, which can be trained, by the way, right? And I think that's one of the things. I think empathy is such an interesting word because we all want to think we're empathetic. We all want to think that, well, of course I can listen to others and be open to, other folks. And I think for most of us actually can. And also it really is, when I'm thinking about emotional intelligence, which is something that can be trained and something that can be learned, and it's a muscle we can exercise, right? For some neurodivergent folks and other folks, like that stuff doesn't come naturally, right? So I think there can be a lot of assumptions made when someone goes from employee to manager that, okay, well, you know what to do as a manager. You just, you got to make sure you're there for your people and you're supporting them. But, where it really comes down is in, soup to nuts understanding, no, this is the job now, right? And this is what it looks like here. This is how you communicate. This is how you set up a one-to-one. This is how we're going to do performance reviews. This is how you check in with folks and what that looks like. When you see something going in the wrong direction, this is how you bring it to HR, right? Like all of that training has to be in place. It's hard to talk about this because if you're a 5-person company or you're a global company, that will look vastly different. But I think if you just start with the idea of knowing that, oh, this is exciting that we can promote this person, we want to keep them, they're great. But the first question should be, do you want to be a manager? Because I've seen so many times that it's happened in our organizations, happened, in other organizations I've worked at. Someone's been promoted to manager and they get there and they're like, I don't really like this. This is not for me. And that should be okay. But have that conversation before you make that shift, right? Have them shadow another manager, have them talk to other folks and find out what it is they like about, right? Because it's not just about a salary hike. It's not just about the perks of being in management. You have to really want that job, because you're also going to leave behind the things that you did like, right? You're really good at your job, right? You're doing great and you're feeling productive and you're feeling like I'm really contributing to the organization and I'm getting recognized. But again, if a good organization that has a plan in place for professional development opportunities and has had those conversations, hopefully they would know ahead of time, right? They know where this person wants to go. Having those open conversations. Because it also should be okay that if you don't want to get promoted, you just really like your job and you want to stay there, you could get recognized and supported in other ways to help you grow as a person.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be a promotion of management.
Absolutely. No. And I think that's a wonderful point, because I don't know how many people I've talked to who were promoted into leadership roles and actually told me, oh, I really miss doing my craft. Like I miss doing the the day-to-day work that was involved in being an individual contributor.
Yep.
And I had one leader tell me, who eventually left the leadership role and went to an individual contributor role, and he said, a huge part of my role as a people leader was managing people's emotions. And I don't think people really tell you that when they promote you. Like, you really have to like people and you have to be okay with dealing with emotions. And then no one trains you how to handle that.
Right. Because if someone is being really emotional and you're empathetic and you're listening, but you're listening and then suddenly the two of you are going on an emotional ride that is probably negative and not serving anybody, that's not helpful, right? But there are a lot of skills to have active listening and understand someone's experience. But then to say, okay, you know what, I think right now what would be best is this, right? To really, you kind of have to be the adult in the room and say, right now, I don't think this is serving us. I think we need to get to the heart of what you actually need or whatever it is. But navigating those conversations can be very challenging. And it, it shouldn't be assumed that people can actually do that. There should be training for that. And there's tons of training for that, to your point about training. And you asked about mental health training in the workplace. The National Council, so this is not MHA, but I'm sure you've heard of mental health first aid. That training is excellent because it helps people to understand how to talk about mental health, signs and symptoms, all the things. And then it trains you to have the conversation to say, okay, and it has a lot of active listening, kind of role playing, right? It sounds like what I'm hearing from you is, you're having this situation. How about I help you get you connected to this resource, or how about we do this, right? So you're not solving the problem for the person, but you're the bridge to help them get help and support. And there's a bunch of other trainings, suicide prevention and other trainings out there that that are really, really helpful for companies. And a lot of them at the heart is a lot of active listening and empathetic approaches, right? So the training will give you specifics around mental health. They'll give you a lot of statistics and data and understanding of different mental health issues. In parallel process, there's a lot of skills building around how to engage with folks within, an open ear and with an eye on not solving the problem, but getting help for them.
Yeah, I love your description of being the bridge, having that leader really be the bridge to help that person get to where they need to go to seek the support they need. Say I'm a people leader and I'm listening to this conversation right now. What would you say is the number one piece of advice you would give that people leader if they're struggling to understand where to start with their employees with having difficult conversations around mental health? Would it be to go to mental health first aid? Or, I mean, what would your suggestion be? What do you tell leaders typically?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, it's context matters, right? So if you're in an organization where you're a manager, but you don't have the support of leadership, which can be tricky, right? Unfortunately, there's a ton of Google searching you can do around emotional intelligence and empathetic leaders and strategies around that. I see you have your insights blocks in the back. I'm very familiar with insights. So there's all sorts of ways of understanding your leadership style, your management style, and how that interacts with other styles. Unfortunately, if you don't have the support of leadership, you're going to have to do that on your own. But if you do have the support of leadership, or if you at least want to start with a conversation with your boss, and whether that's the CEO or another manager, really I think the conversation starts with, hey, I'm concerned and I'm stressed about how to support my people. Back to your point about vulnerability, I think we're going to close the loop on that. Like, I need help because I feel like I'm not doing a good job and I'm concerned about myself. It's hard to argue with that approach, right? It's hard to say, oh boy, this person really needs help and support. Let's dig into what that looks like. If you take a preventative approach, you're getting ahead of this. If you can see that things are just either your team struggling, or maybe it's just one person, or whatever it is, the more you can invest in yourself and your understanding and your skills building about being an empathetic, supportive manager, and also take the stress off yourself to know that it is a skill, right? Like if I could have any message go out there, it's, give yourself some grace and understand that this doesn't come naturally to everyone. As a matter of fact, even empathetic, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you would say the same. Like it's an art and a science. Like it's even if you're naturally empathetic and you're a good listener, how that plays out with different folks and what different folks are struggling with can be different, right? So it really takes some skills building.
It absolutely does. And even as a natural empath, I am building my skills on a daily basis.
Sure.
It's never going to be where I want it to be. I think the listening piece is so important. And even if you feel like you are an active listener, the more I study active listening, the more I realize I have work to do.
We all do, right?
Yeah. Well, this was really such a positive way to start the day. And I feel like as we finish this conversation, there's hope. After talking to you and the work you're doing at Mental Health America, there are strong resources in place for leaders. We just have to make them aware of these resources and also make them aware that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the campaign slogan from General Dynamics was something like, "How are you doing, really?"
Really, yeah.
I loved that. Great. Because why don't we just ask this question to ourselves,
right,
to our colleagues, to the people who report to us? How are you doing, really? And let's just start the conversation and share and see how we can support each other more. So thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing all the great work you're doing at MHA. It's really inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to talk with you, and it is bell seal season. So if I could just share that, if you're an employer and you want to, benchmark and also understand how you're doing around creating a mental healthy workplace, we have a recognition and certification program that is applications are open until April 4th.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzi. This was such a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to our next chat whenever that is.
It's wonderful meeting you, and I'm glad you got the memo that we're supposed to wear the same thing. So that was great.
Yeah, it was the ESP working.
Totally, 100%. Thanks for having me on, Rebecca. I appreciate it.
This podcast is designed to help busy business leaders create an inspired and engaged workforce. I am building a community of like-minded leaders and experts who all share the same passion: taking care of people at work. Whether you are a blue-collar worker or a white-collar worker, small business owner or corporate executive, you belong in this community. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you know someone who I should interview or should be part of this community, please connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.